Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Croxford. We want to welcome you to the USF Summer Grant Writing Workshop. I'm the office manager for the Regional Chancellor's Office here at USF Sarasota-Manatee campus, and I will be serving as the chat facilitator for this 8-week program. We should have mailed everyone who registered with us a tag journal prior to this course. So if you've not yet received your tag journal, please email me directly. My email is in the chat, but I'll put it in there again because it looks like it has gone down in the vent there. So we'll make sure that you get that tag journal. If you're attending in person and you don't have one, there are some extras in the room. So please make sure that you pick one up. All notifications are going to be sent to you via Canvas. If you have any questions, you can either email me directly again, or I'll put our group mailbox star-research@usf.edu in the chat as well. So that will be the 2 email addresses that you will use to communicate during this course. There are also discussion boards up on Canvas, so please feel free to take advantage of those. This year, we're welcoming approximately 100 participants from 24 distinct institutions, including those tuning in from international destinations. Presentations will be provided by subject matter experts. Slide decks and related materials will all be posted in Canvas in resources. We invite you to post your questions in chat. Sandy will be pausing at various points during her presentation to take questions. Also, feel free to raise your hand to ask a question. We always welcome the engagement. Today's presentation is being recorded. That recording will be shared via a link posted on the course page in Canvas. And then I would now introduce Sandy, our host, Sandy Justice. She's a certified research administrator. She serves as the Associate Director of Research for the USF Sarasota-Manatee campus. In addition to providing these workshops, she works with USF faculty to develop research and find funding. Sandy established a research magazine, and I will post that link in there too, and that will show you, that'll be in our chat, show you what's happening down here at USF Sarasota-Manatee in terms of research. And Sandy, I think that's it for me, so I will take it away. Let you take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. It's going to be fun. We're going to kick off today. We're going to learn about grant writing throughout this course. And the tag journal that you have is custom made to complement this course. And I hope that you find it very useful. Now we're going to go ahead and just dive into the presentation. We're going to go very quickly through the slides because we want to be able to have time at the end to really get to know each other, talk about our research and our research aims. And the slides are available in the in Canvas and should have been emailed to you. So everyone who's registered should have received that by email. And of course, these are recorded, so you can always revisit. So nothing in life is to be feared, only understood. And that is what we do. Research builds knowledge, builds understanding, and advances what we can achieve. Introduced me already. And Dave, our wonderful facilitator and MC, and Hawa Alarakia, who is manning the controls like the Wizard of Oz, behind the scenes if you have any technical difficulties. So this is our path, our road, and we're going to start today with our research purpose. Why are you doing this? What is the grant that you want to write? What do you want funding for? And then we're going to move on to defining the need and significance of your project, your study design or methodology, the process and the data stewardship. What are you gathering? How are you going to share it? And then the broader outcomes and impact that you want to have, and so on. I'm going to go ahead and hide this, I think. And we want you to be able to earn a credential. We have 2 credentials as described in the syllabus, a digital badge, which you see here. At the end of the course, earn a digital badge, and you can put it out on your LinkedIn and your ResearchGate and all of these social media platforms that you can be on, and a certificate. And how you earn these credentials are defined in the syllabus, but prove and demonstrate your understanding and make these lessons, these elements concrete by writing your grant as a part of the course. The core components of the program are the Monday message, and that is the message that you will receive through Canvas, the training activity guidebook, the Wednesday workshop today, and the Funding Friday, which is, of course, Friday. And when we have invited speakers, if we have someone from NSF or NIH or any of the sponsoring agencies, IES, they will come on Fridays. Friday and Wednesday are recorded. So if you are traveling or unable to make it, don't worry, you can still see it. And we're coming to you from the beautiful University of South Florida, global preeminent R1 institution. Go Bulls. So let's get to the core of it. Why are we here? How will your research change the world? Will you end poverty, cure illnesses, improve education? All of the wonderful things that you can do through research. All begins with one thing, your purpose. What is your purpose? And learning how to understand what your purpose is and explain it is something that is incredibly important, because you do it in writing and you do it verbally. Will your presentation on a video clip be what the peer reviewers see, or will they read 15 pages about your research? How will you articulate your research purpose and why your project, your research is significant and has impact? Many sponsors are federal and they provide funding for research. Some of the sponsors will be philanthropic or even donors, someone that you meet while fishing, or if you're out at a party and talking about your research. Research is funded by people that care about what you're doing. So being able to articulate is key. And as you narrow your lens, as you really focus on what you're going to do, you're going to think about how you start up your research, how you get internal funds at your university and do proof of concept or preliminary studies, early career funding opportunities that are specific to people that are within their first 10 years of their career, collaborative grants, large complex grants. And why I go through this lens is because we want you to be able to apply for multiple grants every year. Beginning with the end in mind, what will your purpose achieve? What is your ultimate goal? And then developing your strategy, your funding strategy for short-term grants and long-term goals. So you get grants in 2004, you write it in 2003, you submit it, 2004, you get your projects funded, and what happens, how do you build from there? And tailoring your search for funding to the research goal and identifying the sponsors, multiple sponsors that will move you forward. Because these are milestones that will help you to define the path. So you develop your preliminary findings or proof of concepts with small projects. Maybe it's an NIH R03 grant or a Spencer Foundation grant. Then you publish and present and share your findings at your conferences and in your top tier journals, collaborating with faculty, collaborating with partners in your community, stakeholders to do more, to scale, and providing projects that will create a network, a tribe, as you will, of people that also care about what you're doing. Because many of the problems that we're focusing on are not solely in a disciplinary track. So if you were trying to solve the problem of food insecurity, where does that come from? That could be religious studies, that could be water and water use, or agricultural. So you want to think about your research problem in broad terms so that you can consider who those colleagues and what network might help you drive that forward. And identify the top people in your field. They may serve as collaborators, partners, or mentors. And a best practice is who are the fathers, who are the heroes in your field, and looking at those CVs and see where they were funded. The road ahead. Where do I start? Oh my gosh, this is so much. So you start with identifying your funding. Where do you want to get funded? How do you know where to look for funding? Well, you know what you want to do, and you want to be able to use those keywords to look in Pivot or PND RFP or grants.gov. And then you also want to be able to know who to turn to for advice. Maybe that's a research administrator in your college or your university, or perhaps that is someone who you identified as a mentor. And where are those opportunities available and how can you find them? We're going to talk about that. So the beginning is capacity, evidence, and capability. What is the capacity that you have for your research? Do you have all the equipment that you need? Do you have the space that you need? Do you have the relative expertise that you need to accomplish your project? What evidence do you have to show the peer reviewers that you can do the project? How achievable is it? And the capability of you and every member of your team and your institution to make sure that that happens. So those are key elements that you want to be able to communicate in your research and things to think about, because we're going to approach this process from a peer reviewer's perspective. You're going to apply for a grant. Who are you writing to? You're writing to your peer reviewers. And it's not a linear path. This path is really, it's unending in that you're going to begin, you're going to develop your project, and it's a domino effect. It's going to build not just the capacity of what you're doing, but the one question often leads to three. So you answer one question with a project, and then you think, okay, how am I going to do these other three projects? And that really expands your ability for scholarship and showing the gaps. And when you begin with a literature review, the literature will often tell you where are the gaps in the knowledge. And when you think about, well, who is my peer reviewer? If you're going to a sponsor that's a federal sponsor, oftentimes those peer reviewers are colleagues just like you. They're scientists, they're scholars at universities and academic institutions that have been there, done that, and have had funded projects and know the literature well. If you're applying to a philanthropic sponsor, however, those stakeholders, those peer reviewers might be members of your community or people that are donors, may not have the level of expertise that you would find at a federal sponsor. So it might change your language or the way that you position your request for funding. So with the peer reviewer in mind and you write your grant, you're thinking about the thought leaders of your field. How do you think about what language you should use? The best advice is to, one, use a single voice. You may have a number of collaborators on your grant, but the proposal at the end of the day should read as a single voice. So if you are collaborating with someone in the UK, for example, then you want to make sure that the language and the spelling is consistent. And when you are using your direct, concise language, you want to be free of jargon. You want to speak to an audience that doesn't have to look up what you mean. It's clear, concise, direct language. And you're beginning with a project summary. And what we've done is we've created an exercise, which is in your tag, and it's called Mad Libs. It's the first exercise that we share, and it's kind of a fun way to think about developing an abstract. The other thing that we want to do is walk through the pieces of a project narrative. So when you open your tag, you're going to see funding opportunity announcements and the beginning information about you. And those are the types of elements that I want you to start thinking about now, because this is the common things that you'll have to incorporate into the beginning pages of a grant application. This is no small venture. The National Science Foundation calculated that it takes about 120 hours on average to write a single investigator grant. And that is over a period of 6 to 8 weeks, which is why this program is defined over 6 to 8 weeks. If you were to have a funding strategy that you wanted to really move forward with your ideas, developing a proposal, managing multiple awards, you want to schedule time. Some people say from 3 to 5 every Thursday, I'm going to focus on grants. Or if you have multiple awards or a very ambitious funding strategy, you may want to dedicate a whole day. Thursday is my research day, and that's all I'm going to do. And on my research day, I'm going to mentor students, I'm going to write grants, I'm going to do literature reviews and read the literature and contribute to the literature with my own scholarship. And when you have funding, what you want to do is leverage that funding to build on itself. You know, say you get startup funds when you join a university. What are the startup needs for your lab? For what do you need to bring that team together? And where do you need to share your research? Well, first, let's find a grant. You know what you want to do. You want to achieve your purpose, and that will help you generate your keywords. And then you plug that into a search engine. Maybe your university subscribes to Pivot or Grant Forward, or perhaps you're looking for something at the Office of Naval Research or Health or National Science Foundation. Finding funding is the first thing you want to do, but you don't always have to find funding through a search engine. You may be able to find it through talking to your colleagues about, this is my research area, this is what I want to accomplish. And word of mouth is one of the top ways that faculty say they found their funding. So when you are thinking about your research and you're articulating your purpose, practice doing it and do it often, with people that are at the top of your field, with your chair, with your dean and director. And when you're at conferences with your colleagues, share what your research is about. Now, this year for the summer grant writing workshops, we've encouraged universities to create cohorts and bring people into a room. And what we want you to do is, whether before or after the workshop session, share what you're talking about as far as your research, share with your colleagues, get to know what they're doing, and do these things together. So grant opportunity databases, many of them are subscription, but some of them are not. Like the Dear Colleague letters at the National Science Foundation, for example, you sign up for them. You go to NSF, you sign up for Dear Colleague letters. And when you pull up those types of requests to be on a news list, it'll ask you, do you want to sign up for all of these directorates, or are you just interested in biology? And the same thing happens when you sign up for Philanthropy News Digest, PND RFPs. You can sign up for an email alert and be early in the game of knowing what you need. And academic analytics, as well as grants.gov, are also really great resources. And when you go to Philanthropy News Digest, I pulled out a few examples to share today. So what you'll see is they'll give you the funding opportunity, the deadline, and a little bit of information about that funding opportunity. When you go into a grant opportunity, you want to understand, am I eligible? Do I have time to meet their deadline? And to prepare throughout this program, what we want to do is create those elements of a proposal, your needs statement, your methodology, your literature review. Begin pulling those elements together these 8 weeks so that you can quickly turn around and tailor your content to a funding opportunity. And we want you to know your sponsor. What is important to your sponsor? You'll find that you won't have just one sponsor. Maybe you say, I am an NSF faculty, I'm going to go for the early career grant, but your grant, your research is also funded by Eli Lilly, or your research is also funded by the Ford Foundation or Pew Foundation. You want to know what those sponsors are, and you want to be able to follow them when they have a newsletter or a new strategic plan. What are their funding priorities? And you want to develop a rapport with those program officers. They want to know you also. One of the best ways to begin that rapport is if they have office hours to attend, and if you're at a national conference and you see them, see people looking at posters, get to know people and introduce them to your research. And remember that you never know, that person could be your next peer reviewer. Imagine that. You could change the world. And it all begins with telling your story. Tell your story informally. You know, it's harder than you think, because the way you speak to a peer in your field will be very different to how you speak to someone at a bar. But everyone that you speak to, sharing your research adds credibility and power to the way you articulate your research. And it helps your research to be discovered. Telling your story can also be done through the conversation, which is a news outlet. You have research that you've done and you want to be able to share it broadly. Applying to private foundations is very different from applying to federal or state sponsors. The way that they formulate their proposal application, there's character limits or word limits. It's different the way that you want to even put together a project title and summary, your opening paragraph, and the way that they ask you to budget. When you think through the anatomy of your request for a proposal, it is often the timeline and eligibility that you want to look at first. You know, is there a letter of intent required? If it's not required, it's just recommended. Do you? You should. You want to be able to tell those faculty, those project officers, listen, I'm preparing this. I think that this fits your program, and this is why that it's important. And the devil's in the details. You want to share enough of your project and what the end is so that you can build a rapport and start a conversation with your program officer and allow them to give you feedback. So before we move forward, how to get away with murder. So I'm sure that I'm putting you to sleep. So let's go ahead and open up for questions.
We did have one question from IS, Sandy. She wants to know, do international participants, can they apply for these suggested grants, the grants that you're going to be discussing?
That is an excellent question. And yes, but there are grants that say only apply if, and that's why eligibility is so important. So National Science Foundation, for example, will say, if you have an international partner, this is what you need to do. Demonstrate why you're partnering with an international scholar. If you're an international scholar looking for funding opportunities, then we should look for funding opportunities specifically for you. Now, just as we have in the US at NSF, there are funding agencies just like ours in every country. And we will look at those funding agencies for your research, as well as those philanthropic foundations that fund globally. Many projects, many research purposes are not specific to a place. Sometimes it is. I want to solve the problem of red tide in Sarasota. That's pretty specific. But if you're trying to address climate change, where's climate change? The whole world. Any more questions?
IS says thanks, but I don't have anything in chat right now. Anyone want to raise their hand?
And feel free to open your video and come online. Happy to see and share. And if we don't have any questions, we will plow through. Coco? Okay, so understanding the application process. So you're going to know and define your purpose, develop the LOI, letter of intent or letter of inquiry, pre-proposal, and then get invited. Those are the usual steps. Speak to your why, understand the significance of your project, write succinctly, and because the white space of your project description or project summary, it's tight and you can't go over a number of pages. You can't let the project purpose or methodology bleed into other sections of your proposal. You want to avoid jargon and acronyms, and you want to be bold and positive in your language. So when you write for a journal, you'll say, we did, we had, this was. But in a proposal, it's we will, we can, this will. Bold, positive, forward-thinking, future tense. Like I will be able to use for my slides. Okay, grants.gov. This is an example of what you would see if you went to grants.gov. You would see an opportunity number, and an opportunity title, an agency, and a brief description. And when you look at that, you think, yay, this is something for me. Or, no, this isn't something for me. But this itself is not enough to make a decision. You want to be able to develop your checklist of what your application is going to need. So in order to know what elements are in that grant opportunity, you need to read the full RFP. What is the budget? What is, you want to create that checklist. You want to know what your page limitations are. And by reading the full RFP, you'll know what the timeline is for that funding opportunity, if you have to be invited or if everybody goes to full proposal, what the eligibility is. Do they allow international branch campuses? How do I justify the benefits of international partners? And important revision notes. This was offered last year, and these are the changes from last year's RFP. And what type of award? How is it a collaborative award? Is it an award that is, all up front, or is it spending authority? How do I get the money, and how am I allowed to spend it? Now, I realize that one, I talk fast. I'm sorry, I talk fast. And two, I'm throwing out a lot of words, acronyms that you may not be familiar with. So there is a glossary at the end of the tag. If you get stuck on something, or if I say something that is alphabet soup, because we have so many jargon and acronyms in this field, then please feel free to put it in the chat and say, you keep saying F and A, I don't know what you mean. I'm happy to come back to it. When you dig into your grant opportunity, you're going to look at the synopsis, which is the same thing, the beginnings of, that you would see on that funding search, whether that's Pivot or grants.gov. You'll see a few little sentences about this funding opportunity. And you want to start thinking, does this fit my research purpose? And then you'll see the funding opportunities, and you'll also see contacts. If you have questions, reach out to us. Do they really want you to? Yes, actually they do. They want to hear from you. Here's what you never, ever want to do. You never, ever want to reach out to a program officer and ask them a question that is answered in the RFP. It's kind of like a student asking you a question that's in the syllabus. Why is that? Mainly because those program officers spend weeks writing these very detailed RFPs. These calls are written by the program officers that you're going to be writing to. They have included links. They have defined why they want this funding and what their priorities are. And they want you to also understand who they want to hear from. They put right out there, these are the directorates, these are the deadlines. They want you to know about what their purpose is And they want you to know that they've cared enough to invest this time to try to make it as clear and comprehensive for you as possible. But sometimes it's still clear as mud. How does that mean? Well, if you apply to NSF, for example, or any federal sponsor, you might see that there are a number of proposal types. Well, you could apply for an early concept grant, or a rapid grant, or a collaborative grant. What are the differences? And the differences are important because if you apply for a research grant, it might be 15 pages, single space, versus a conference grant, which might be 6 or 9 pages. And at a research grant, you might say 3 years at $350,000 a year versus a conference grant, which is $50,000. So you want to be able to know what you need as far as funding and how that translates to how you develop your grant. Well, how will you know? It begins with, I know I'm repeating myself, purpose, and then scope. What is the scope of your award? What is the scope of your project? Do you know already that I'm going to build a center? I need 10 years of funding. It needs to be $10 million a year. This is what I want to do. Well, great. But if you need to plan it first because you don't know what your stakeholders are, you don't know who the advisory board might be, you don't have a sustainability plan for your center after the external sponsors, startup funds end, then maybe you should start with a planning grant. The same thing with all of these different types. You want to think about, here is my sponsor, know your sponsor. What types of grants does your sponsor provide? Do they have an R03 grant for startup for the beginnings, an R21, which is a 2-year grant at NIH, and then an R01? Do you want to do stages? And then after you dig into the types of grant, you want to understand how you apply to that sponsor. And that is understanding your sponsor and those checklists, those guidelines. For NSF, it's called a PAP guide. NIH has their own guide. And when you go to your sponsor, whether it's the Ford Foundation, they'll have their guidelines. So you want to be familiar with your sponsor, know what you want to apply for, the scope of your work, and then map that to the type of funding and apply using their proposed application guidelines. Say you know what kind of grant you want to apply for, you know the sponsor, and you go to the RFP and it says, yes, and which track are you? Okay, sometimes it's thrusts, sometimes it's tracks, but you want to be able to read through all of the elements and decide which one fits best. So we all remember those tests, the GRE and all of these tests that we take, and we know that they're multiple choice, and 2 of the answers really are an answer. But which one is the best answer? And that's the same kind of thing. And when you have read through the RFP and you say, oh, well, mine actually fits 2 of these tracks. That is a great way to send a concept, a 1-page concept to your program officer and say, I'd love to have a conversation with you, maybe a half an hour online to talk about which track really fits the best. And that way you can get some information from the program officer about what their priorities are for each track. And when you're looking at your RFP, one thing that you can do is maybe Control F and find must, or returned without review. What is required? And when you go through your RFP, you'll see that this must have this, or this is recommended. And you think through all the things that, because you want to create that list. You want to say, I need to be able to have this alliance. I need to have this collaborator. I need to be able to show the demographics or the geography. I need to have a logic model as part of my application. And I know that it's asking a lot. And I'm going to ask to keep reading. These requests for proposals or requests for applications can be 7 to 14 pages. And a lot checklist. But you don't go all the way down to the end because you want to get started. You're eager, and I love that. But if you keep reading, oftentimes it will tell you, how are these grants going to be reviewed? What criteria will peer reviewers be given? So your peer reviewers are coming into the room and they're going to be told by the program officer, you're going to see 15 applications. These are the things that we want you to score, and these are the important things that we want to prioritize. Most sponsors have standard criteria, but oftentimes an RFP will have additional criteria. And where would you find this additional criteria? In the RFP. So we talked a bit about NSF, NIH, very similar. You're going to look at the grant types, an R03 or R21. There are also U grants and P grants and K grants. And timeline. Do you need to do a letter of intent? Even if it says recommended, they really mean, please send me a letter of intent. Let me know what you're applying for. Letter of intents, though, they're brief, they're to the point, they're never more than a one page unless you're applying for $160 million, right? So if you're writing to the program officer, it's an optional letter of intent. You want to be professional, courteous, to the point, and you want to tell them what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and why it's important, very briefly. You'll have plenty of time to dig into the details in the full RFP. And you want to make sure that you're eligible. Why embark on this big journey if you're not eligible? Well, Sandy, what if I'm not eligible, but this guy that I've been talking to at this foundation, he's eligible? Partner. Develop partners that are strategic, that are aligned with your purpose, so that when you're not eligible, you can partner with them and they can submit and you can be on the grant as a sub-recipient. And think about those revision notes. A lot of these big sponsors publish every year funding opportunities, but they make changes based on the changing needs of your country or region. And anticipate that funding. How much funding do you need aligns directly to how much the scope of work is. We're going to talk about that. The USDA, the Department of Education, all of these other funding sponsors, they're going to tell you what those significant changes are. They're going to tell you those proposal types. They're going to ask you for specific types of budgets. And when you're thinking about your budget, and we'll get to this on week 6, I think it's week 6 for budgets. You want to think about not just, oh my goodness, it says I can apply for $1 million, but should you? Just because you can, you want to make sure that your budget is appropriate to the scope of work. And a good way to check is to look at previously funded projects. Well, what has been funded the last couple of years, and look and see, they really don't fund more than $700,000 a year. And think about those prerequisites. And if you're thinking about prerequisites for a grant that you want to apply for down the road in your funding strategy, because you want, what am I going to apply for this year? How is it going to build on next year? And what is my long range plan? Think about what those elements are. What evidence do you need to have? What credibility characteristics will build your reputation and help you to be an achievable, credible applicant, competitive in the market? When you're doing that eligibility match, you're really thinking about who I am as a PI, as a principal investigator. See, acronyms are everywhere. Are you a postdoc? Are you early career? Are you mid-tenure? And it may be that you're mid-tenure and you're changing direction of your research. Are there grants specifically for that? You may be an established PI that are returning to develop a larger portfolio. And as you develop your eligibility match and you're matching to your sponsors, remember that every sponsor will have different eligibility. And sometimes the eligibility will be different within an RFP, request for proposal. For example, the 2024 Beckman Young Investigator Beckman Young Investigator really wants to fund early career, and how they define early career may be different than how NIH defines early career. So you need to drill down into those eligibility guidelines and how much they fund. Some of the sponsors will say, we're going to fund $100,000 a year for X number of years. And that's what it is. And sometimes they'll tell you, you can have up to $600,000. So how do you get the most out of your grant? Really will help you define your project scope. What can you do for that amount of money? And the NIH Director's Early Independence Award. Why are these grants important? One, they want to help young investigators, people within 10 years of their PhD oftentimes, or new into an assistant professor role. And they want to help you be successful and stay the course and be on track with your research portfolio. And they want to really look at those high risk, high reward grants. What do you mean by that? Does that mean I could just ask for the moon? No, it does not. What it does mean is sponsors realize that people new in the field are bringing in new ideas. They're creative thinkers. They're critically examining the need in their research purpose, and they're coming up with really bold ideas. And they want to hear those bold ideas, and that's why they create these early career opportunities. When you look at a grant online, you'll see some common elements. For example, when you look at an NIH grant, it'll have a number that tells you not only what year that grant is, but also what type of activity code. An R01 grant, for example, is a research grant, has R01, which is the 5-year grant, what you want to work towards. It also tells you information on which grant is it, a serial number. And you can go through the timeline, the revision notes, just as you would with any other funding type. And it's kind of like nesting dolls. When you're applying for a grant, you want to make sure that you're following all the rules. Well, what are the rules? You have institutional policies, whether you're at West Texas or Illinois or North Carolina. What are the rules of the road at your institution? Do you need to do an internal form or an authorization form to make sure your chair approves you to apply for this grant? And then they have the sponsor guidelines. What does NSF expect? What does NIH expect? Or Horizon 2020. And then you have the larger rules. What rules apply to the entire nation? Uniform guidance. And planning your grant, beginning with the end in mind, means you want to think about, well, assuming you get the award, what do you do? Do you have everything that you need so that you can be successful? And you want to pay special attention to what's required. You don't want to be returned without review. And you want to think through, okay, if I got this grant, what would I need? Probably a course release, right? You need time to do the work. And before you embark on it, say you get approval to go after this large grant, are you registered within that electronic research administration system? If you're going for a Spencer grant, that might be a Smart Simple form that you need to put in your biographical sketch and register for so that it opens the application. Or maybe you're NSF and you have to start with research.gov. You want to think about what you need to do in advance so that you're prepared to apply. And you don't want to put those things off to the end. Say, well, Sandy, I need to have my biographical sketch in Science CV. Well, you should probably do that now. That way, when you're applying for your grant, you don't have to rush to the end. It's like, oh my gosh, I still have to do my biographical sketch. It might take longer than you think. So get these things done and out of the way as early as you can. And create that checklist. And we're going to share some sample checklists with you so that you can see what typically is on a checklist, from timeline to writing and editing. We're going to walk through some of those best practices so that you can move your grants from good to great Because we don't want you to just apply, we want you to win. And that means understanding not just what we bring to you through this course, but also what your sponsors bring to you as a matter of course. Those webinars, those office hours, those trainings that are available to you as a scholar and a scientist. And we also want to provide those sample proposals. Say you do want to go after an early career grant at the federal sponsor where you are. What do those grants look like? If you go to Open Grants, which the website is here, you'll see that you can sort by sponsor or by research area and look at those sample grants. Where did those grants come from? This is an open opportunity for you to, when you are funded, for you also to share your grant application and be a part of that community. Why would you want to do that? Well, by sharing your proposals, by sharing your research and publications, by writing for the conversation, what you're doing is you're expanding your influence to make change in your research area, but also introducing and raising the visibility of your research to potential stakeholders, donors, developers, peer reviewers, and partners. I told you I talk fast. So what is that grant content that we need to think about? Oh my gosh, Sadie, are you kidding? I'm not kidding. Although NSF, for example, will say you only need to develop 15 pages, or NIH will say 12 pages. A typical grant can be between 120 and 200 pages because they're going to want to know what facilities you have. Do you have a mentoring plan for your graduate students and your postdocs? Are there multiple investigators on your project? Are you partnering? And all of these pieces we're going to talk about and develop as we move through these 8 weeks. But I want you to start thinking about how reading that RFP will allow you to take note of those required elements and start thinking about what goes in there. And remember that this is a skill. Grant writing is not like publishing for Nature or for Science, in that when you're grant writing, you're telling your story, but you're also illustrating it. You're also demonstrating evidence of it. You're speaking to the significance of your project, and you're speaking to the priorities of the sponsor and how your project responds to those priorities. Maybe those priorities are, how are you training the workforce relevant to this area of research? Are you engaging graduate students in your project? So thinking through the time management that it requires, the language that you use, how it's illustrated, how it's explained, how you will have an impact, as well as how you will budget your time and the resources for this project. Now, as I've mentioned, there are no required books. And truthfully, there are 100 books on grant writing for dummies, grant writing for biomedical clinics, grant writing for humanities and social sciences. But if I were to recommend one book for you, it would be Strunk and White's Elements of Style, because that's what you want to do. You want to write clearly. You want to be succinct and direct. You want to tell them what you want to do, why it's important, how it will create impact, how it will be accomplished, and what the outcomes will be. Clear, concise, compelling. So why do we do research? Well, if we didn't create evidence, there would be no evidence-based practices. When we do research, we advance knowledge, we improve our understanding, and we can transform practice, transform lives, drive innovation, create change. And isn't that what we're all here for? Isn't that why we got our degree?
Sandy, I hate to interrupt, but we have a question in the chat. Yusuf would like to know if you can share send sample proposals to previously accepted grants to program officers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Happy to do it. Sharing, am I sharing? Yes. Okay, can everyone see that?
No.
Oh, drats, I messed it all up. Leave it to me. Share screen. Okay, how about that?
Yes.
Okay. So why this project speaks to intellectual merit. How are you advancing the field? Significance. Where do you pull significance from? Understanding the body of knowledge for your research. And that is done by doing a really comprehensive literature review. And what the impact will be. Why do you want to do this? How will it create change? And why here? What is so special about your university? What is so special about your region? Why should this project happen in that state or that country? Are there unique aspects of the age demographic or the need relative to your research in that opportunity zone? And this is where you want to talk about the priorities of the sponsor, the priorities of the institution, as well as the specific needs where you are. And why now? Now, a lot of research was done around COVID. It was obvious. Of course, we want to do it now. It's a pandemic. But some problems have been around for a really long time. How do we improve food security? How do we end poverty? How do we improve literacy? Understanding why now also speaks to your ability to speak to the transformational nature, the impact of the work. And that will be illustrated through your capacity to publish, to share, to present, to make sure that that information is used and usable. Sometimes that is data. You develop a lot of health data for your project through your research, and you contribute it to a national database that addresses that health aspect. And let's do this. Let's begin. Let's start thinking about it. And what I'm going to invite you to do now is to turn on your cameras and begin talking to me about what your research areas are and why it's important. Did I stop sharing? Yes.
You did.
Good. Here we are. So let's go ahead and go to gallery view, bring everybody into the room. So hello, and welcome. So why don't you share with me what it is you want to do in your research and why it's important?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'll go ahead and start. I didn't quite think about this before the meeting, but as you were talking, I started to think of, what direction I could get into. But my research interests are in logistics and cybersecurity. And so I'm really in this course because I have no experience with grant writing, and I want to have some knowledge of how to move forward in that direction. My goal is to write for a grant to enhance our current computer information systems and logistics program. And so although I don't have a clear direction for that now, I do have that as an idea.
That's wonderful, Sheila. Is it Dr. Lamar?
Yes.
Wonderful, Dr. Lamar. And I'm going to point you first to look at the NSF SAT-C grants to see if that really maps to what you want to achieve. Do you know what SATSI is?
I don't. I'm familiar with the HBCU Up. I've worked on a grant in the TIP grant. But I'm not familiar with that one you just mentioned.
I put it in the chat and I will remember to send it to you if you are not able to find it.
Thank you.
Welcome. So who would like to be next?
Hello,
Hello.
my name is Yas
Hello, yes.
from Malaysia. My field is in marketing.
You will have to turn the camera on if you go up there. She can hear you from here.
All right, my field
All right,
is in
yes. Marketing.
okay. All right, so I would like to ask you, what is the chance of social science people to get the grant from NSF?
Well, what is the chance of social science researchers to get a grant from National Science Foundation? Really good. We have a directorate called the Social Behavioral Economics Directorate that focuses specifically on social science grants. And international grants, you want to also look at the grants in your country, the federal sponsors in your country. And let's see. I do also want to mention that there are a number of philanthropic sponsors that fund marketing research focused on the area of significance that you want to look at. So within marketing, you want to think, well, what is my research question? What do I want to advance or improve? Does that help?
Yeah, it's help, but I'm interested with the one that you tell me just now, like social science, NSF, economics, something like that. Can I have the full name of that fund?
SBE, and that's the directorate. So under the NSF is the name of the sponsor, and the sponsor has a number of directorates, and this particular directorate is behavioral, if I can spell, I might be able to, and economics. And then funding opportunities within this directorate.
All right, thank
So-
you, thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, yes.
All right.
Who wants to be next?
Hello, Sandy. This is Lee from West Texas A&M University. I do health communication research, and at this point, I have a preliminary research idea. I wanted to study how parents of immigrant families communicate with their kids about substance prevention. The project is important because numerous research shows that family communication about substance could play a major role in kids' behavior. Some people, so parents' attitudes and parents' communication to their kids about substance could significantly affect kids' attitudes toward substance and their behavioral intentions. So I spent some time browsing those grants websites yesterday and this morning, and I feel like health communication is an interdisciplinary field. It's like between communication and health and public health. So it's so what would you recommend? What kind of grant would you recommend me to apply? So there are many in the NSF. On the NSF website, there are many health grants, but they are all about clinical trials or something like that. But mine is more a social science aspect. So what do you think?
That is an excellent idea. I would look at NIH, which is health, and I would look at NSF because they would be very different types of grants. If your project was to define the research relative to impact for communicating or helping parents communicate about their children's substance abuse problems, or helping children to communicate with their parents, then that might be a SAMHSA grant, and I put that in the chat, or another philanthropic sponsor. But we're happy to help you find those funding opportunities because that is an important aspect of building those communication pathways, which could save lives.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Who wants to be next?
Sandy, can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Yes, just now you mentioned about philanthropics that also funded social science research. Would you mind if you share with me? If you have some.
I would share with everyone. So P&D RFP is a wonderful resource for finding philanthropic sponsors. There are more ways to find philanthropic sponsors, but this is a really great place to start.
All right. Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome. Hi, Alexis. Would you like to talk about USDA grants?
Hi, morning. Yeah, so one of the major agencies that's fund research, around food security and food interventions and food and health is the USDA. So I was looking at the syllabus real quick, but I never see anything mentioned related to USDA. It's only mostly other agencies. I was just wondering if we will be addressing that a little bit or not at all.
We can, absolutely. USDA and NIFA, NIFA, those sponsors look mainly at agricultural or grants that deal with farming and farming practices, but they also fund quite a lot of training grants and opportunities around engineering innovations relative to the USDA mission. That's why we want to know our sponsor, and that's the first thing we want to do is focus on that sponsor. And they're unique. USDA grants are not the same as NSF grants or NIH grants. So when you identify your sponsor, you want to read that RFP and really understand their guidelines as well. Have you identified a specific grant within the USDA?
Yeah, I look a couple. So the whole thing of taking this course will be to write a proposal to one of the RSP that I already identified. So I'm looking forward to that.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you.
Tiffany has her hand up.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
So I'm a research development professional at James Madison University, and my research area is the research infrastructure. And so there's two grants that I'm looking to pursue. One, I am just, because of the amount, I'll say is more low level, which is NORDUP, has the Info Ready grant. And there's a variety of categories that we can request support for, financial support for, which is $5,000. But the ultimate grant that I would like to pursue or work on pursuing through this class is the NSF Granted, which is a new solicitation through NSF. And I've already applied once, but initially, just from some previous webinars that NSF has done, I wasn't the PI for it. We used like an experienced NSF PI from the past. And one of the things that they have really advocated for is that the research development professional should be the PI. That is not a typical NSF grant. So a lot of the traditional proposals that people have been awarded in the past through NSF is different. So that's what I'm hoping to work on over the next several weeks.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I too am writing a granted grant, and I put one in before for the first call. It was super fun. Love being a PI. And what's really terrific about this unique opportunity is that they ask for grants to be submitted as soon as possible. So the National Science Foundation is on a federal calendar, which means their end of year is September 30th. And they'd like to get as many proposals in before the end of year as possible to demonstrate the the wealth of ideas and the breadth of projects that they can take into their next year. They have $50 million and they want to see your ideas. They've asked for big, bold ideas that can make national transformation. How do you know that your project fits the bill? Step one, develop a one-page concept. What are you going to do? Why is it important? How will you do it? In one page. And that will help you to send that up to the granted email, schedule a half an hour with a program officer, and talk through what are they looking for? Well, how will you evaluate success? How will you accomplish it? Who will your partners be? And how will this lead to national transformation? Yes, do it, Tiffany. Who's
Thank you.
next? I can call on people.
I can go next.
Yay.
So I am a biologist and I'm also a research proposal specialist at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. My name is Melanie Mendez. I'm working on how burn pits affect the brain. And so smoke from burn pits is bad. So we're trying to figure out exactly what those effects are going to be on military personnel. And yeah, I'm trying to mainly for my job as a proposal specialist, I'm here, but I'm also interested for my biology side.
That's wonderful. So you want to think about, well, who really wants to fund projects for these stakeholders? And if you're looking at soldiers, then perhaps you want to look at Department of Defense or DARPA. When you look at the syllabus, you'll see some of those past invited talks. The two from DARPA are especially good at how you frame that funding opportunity and how you really develop those questions and respond to what DARPA people want to fund. And it is a staged process. You want to first develop a concept, you want to respond to the program officer, and the way that they fund you is different. They have a ton of money that they want to invest in projects that align with their priorities. And the best way to start is to develop that abstract or paragraph about what you're going to do and why it's important, and emailing it to them, to their program officer, and letting them know, this is what I want to do, and can we have a conversation about if this fits? If you email it to a program officer and they say, this is really interesting and I really like the direction you're going, but I'm not the program officer, but the guy down the hall, he would love to fund this, so I'm going to refer you. And you wouldn't even know if you want to really move down the hall unless you have that conversation. So we're going to talk about how you have those conversations. I really encourage you to first look at those videos. When I say know your sponsor and understand what you want to go for, many of those sponsors have been invited speakers before, which is why I shared that. And I encourage you to, if you one of your sponsors has already done a video, please look at them. They're incredibly good. Does that help, Melanie?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Wonderful. Next.
Hi, my name is Sheila Scott. I'm actually retired faculty, so I'm pretty familiar with grants and research. But the organization I work for just started a nonprofit. And what we're wanting to do, they also own a for-profit business that offers training for hospitality, and we use it for students as well as companies. But the nonprofit is to offer free training, online training for unemployed and underemployed individuals trying to enter the workforce. And so I'm coming from a little different perspective than I think a lot of the people here, because there will be, I mean, I can do data to get results, but I'm not doing research for the sake of publishing or presenting.
But you are doing grant writing so that you can develop a program that meets a very specific need. And it
Correct.
might be hard to figure out, well, how do I reach the people that don't have jobs to receive the training? How will they even know about it, right?
Right, yeah,
And
absolutely.
And will this training help them to move forward and get the job that they need? Will it provide a credential? How do I incorporate credentials into a program? And how do I know what they need and give it to them and let them know that it's available? Wow, that's a big program. Do
Yeah.
you know what sponsor you want to go for?
No, we just got our nonprofit approval within about the last 6 weeks. And so we were we wanted to make sure we were able to get it before we really kind of started looking heavily towards, on how to present it to get the individuals. And we've got a couple of things with the National Restaurant Association has a grant already to provide training. So we've talked to them a little bit, but we really, we're going to need money to get the program out there.
Absolutely right.
So I have no idea really at what point where to start, because as I said, it's totally opposite from anything I've done in the past.
Well, let's think about it. So we know that there are a lot of colleges across the country that have hospitality programs that teach hospitality. But when you graduate with a hospitality degree, what do you do? And is that a pipeline for people to take your training, or are you looking for people that don't have a degree that are in need of a job? Are you looking for people that are fresh out of high school? How would you target the audience, and what would you give them in the training that would position them? Have you met with or discussed a training program with hotels or restaurants and understand what their training needs are? What would position these this workforce to be successful in those industries? So you may need a planning grant, a needs study, or really just to start thinking through how you would reach the audience and what you would deliver and what those outcomes would be.
Right. Well, I'm actually, as I said, retired faculty in hospitality, and we partner with USF and their hospitality program also. And then the owner of my company I work for owns a hotel company. So I've got a lot of those. I've got those resources that I need. And our audience that we're really looking at are unemployed, as well as those maybe coming out of prison or coming out, women having to re-enter the workforce. So it's not so much college grads. They have all the resources they need. Some of them would be high school. So, but it's really unemployed and underemployed is what we're looking for. People who want to advance to be able to earn a living wage.
Mm-hmm. So that might be something that you want to develop a scope and start thinking about who you would pitch that to as far as a sponsor.
Okay.
The first that came to my mind was the state. What is Florida? Florida is a huge hospitality and tourism state. Are there state grants that would fund that? And if there aren't state grants that would fund that, could you propose a white paper to help develop an earmark for your foundation? How would this serve the state?
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for partnering with the University of South Florida. Who's next?
Hello, Cindy. This is Kathy Webster, and I teach at Illinois State University. And I'm interested in looking into esports athletes, and oops, there I am. And esports has been exploding recently on
Especially in Korea.
college campuses and everywhere. And I teach in health sciences, so I'm interested in looking into the knowledge that esports athletes may have about injuries, esports or gamers, serious gamers that spend hours at this, which esports athletes do. And what are their injuries? What are their health issues? Carpal tunnel, or also I'm finding out back and neck injuries from bad posture, whatever. But also their level of knowledge and what they do. I've talked with some who just kind of self-treat. And college students don't always look long-term at what price they're going to pay for this 10 or 20 years down the road. So I'd like to
Their health, right?
look into their level of injuries and their level of knowledge about their injuries. And are they doing anything to minimize their risk of injuries?
So this speaks to not just social engineering, helping people to understand, what their posture does as far as the impacts to your spine, to your brain, but also the opportunity for health education, raising the visibility of these problems as real problems, and it paves the way to innovation. I mean, maybe there's a brace or a solution. If you drank water and took a 20-minute walk every 2 hours, then X. But it all begins with discovery and understanding what you want to accomplish with your project and bringing in the right partners so that you have the expertise that maybe first would be health, another might be engineering if you want to develop something that will help give a physical reminder of posture. Does that help?
Yes, it does. This is a project I've just started recently, but my area really of central interest is virtual reality and augmented reality, and using that in education. So if you have any ideas of who might be funding something like that.
Yes,
There's a crossover there because of the #1 issue with esports is eye fatigue, and it's going to be the same with the AR and VR. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You're all that? Okay, sorry.
So when you're thinking about it, also remember that when like the Hive, whatever it used to be called, one of the first developers of that, it's Oculus is really popular right now, the VR. When they first came out with those things, they said only for 20 minutes a day to make sure that you don't have an injury. Why is that? Why did the creators put limits on how long kids had those VRs on, and they communicate that? And where did that go? When they first came out, they had all these health standards of you should only do it for 20 minutes a day, but now you can buy one and have it on for 8 hours a day. Are we having any health impacts? And how do we understand those health impacts? So there's still a lot to learn, and it creates a lot of opportunity to create visibility around the problem and potential interventions and the effectiveness of interventions. Does limiting time actually solve a problem? Or if you do it 20 minutes a day, but you do it every day, is it still going to lead to health impacts?
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. What's next?
Hi, Sandy.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, Isaac.
My name is Isaac Chen. I'm working with my collaborators at the university, Illinois State University. We are working on the virtual reality, using virtual reality for the speech language pathology rehab for community reentry. So the thing is, from what we understand right now, we really need to develop an ecosystem. So, but it seems like most of the grant focus on something deeper instead of course, the broader impacts should be part of your proposal. But how do we present something like that? This is what is going to happen if we have a data to support the use of virtual reality in the speech language pathology.
That is a great question. And I'm glad you asked, because virtual reality has been employed as a tool in a lot of different types of interventions and training programs. I would start with looking at the literature of how virtual reality has been used to help nurses and train nurses to respond quickly and develop that almost muscle memory for working in emergency rooms so that they mitigate the stress of quick decisions, or virtual reality for firefighters. When you do your literature review, you want to think broadly about how this tool has been used, and then speak to how this novel approach, you're using virtual reality, you understand how it's been used in other training programs, which is evidence that this is a useful tool, and then extrapolate how you envision this will improve the way that you reach people for language disorders, and how the pathology of your intervention is delivered through the new tool and as an intervention.
Yes, we already did some of the literature review, and then the VR application in the speech language pathology was quite limited, and especially when we talk about community reentry, it is really not just focused on the speech part, but for the cognitive or decision making. So you mentioned like nursing or nurses training or the firefighters, they are under a lot of stress, trying to achieve something very quickly. But the target patient we have right now is usually those who are post-trauma. So they are being trained or rehabbed in order to like to age in place or something like that. Does that change your suggestions?
It does a little bit, especially when you think about your IRB application of how you're protecting human subjects in your research. But I would also look at those warfighters that VR is an intervention to treat PTSD for returning warfighters.
Oh, PTSD. Okay. Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing some of those project summaries. Your projects sound great, and I can't wait to help as we build these programs, these projects. It's going to be fantastic. It's exciting.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
I think Narlan wanted to ask a question.
Bring it. Question?
Well, hi, hello, Sandy. My name is Carolina Adila, and I actually signed up for this grant writing course. I don't necessarily have any areas of focus or studies that I'm undertaking. However, I am a student, and upon having conversations with some of my professors, they definitely let me know that there is grants available to me to help me continue my education. So I was seeking grants for my specific educational endeavors. But in addition to that, I think that this will be a great skill for me to have as I move forward in my career path. So this is why I undertook this class. But it seems like I will be learning far more than what I essentially thought. Yes.
But with regards to people that are students that want to go for a dissertation grant or a fellowship, and all those early investigator faculty that want to develop those early investigator grants, these grants are not always specific to a research area, as their professional development. They are also about how are you going to move the field forward? How are you going to contribute? Why are you dedicated to this field? And what are you going to do with it? You know, say you get $100,000 to finish your dissertation studies. Then what? After you've done your dissertation and you're a doctor, what are you going to do with it? Are you becoming an academic? Are you going to be a researcher in a lab? What's your vision for your future? So thinking through not just research questions or training programs, but also your professional development as another type of funding opportunities that you can really consider writing through this program. Does that help?
Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to develop on that and discover what we can do.
Fantastic. And do we have anyone else who would like to go? I can pick on people.
Hi,
Hi, Michael.
go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Hi, I'm Michael Rowley, and I'm a assistant professor of family consumer sciences teacher education at Illinois State University. And so my research, I kind of do a few different things. I look at the history of home economics, the policies around that in educational institutions, as well as the teacher training and retention of FCS teachers in our pipeline. It's kind of like all the things I cover.
That's a ton.
Yes.
I remember taking home economics. It was, I think, a century ago, but we still had taxes. We had to learn how to do our taxes and how to create a budget. And as we move towards a recession, which I hope we don't have, but I'm thinking that we might, how are we preparing our students and our community to really budget and prepare our homes and our habits for a lean time, right? So I think what you're doing is extremely important. I can't wait to read about what you want to put forward in a proposal. Do you know the scope of your proposal, the objectives? And that's one of the reasons why we developed this fun little exercise in the Mad Libs, because the Mad Libs allows you the opportunity to think through, this is what I want to do, and these are the objectives.
Yeah, so I have a few different projects I'm working on. The one that I thought of when I signed up for this was to do the Spencer postdoc, and to look at actually the history of the use of practice babies in our college home economics programs, and the impact that's had, and kind of the ripples it'll have in our education, from having the actual practice babies in starting like 1910s and going up into the 1950s and 60s.
I hope this becomes a book eventually, so I would read it.
I'm thinking that's what it's going to be. I don't know, we'll see, because no one in my field is really talking about it. And I really didn't, until I did my dissertation, I didn't know that it was like a thing, that we rented babies from families. So.
Well, you know, sometimes you find a problem when something is absent. Well, they used to have home ec, but they don't have that anymore. Or they used to teach cursive, but they don't teach that anymore. Well, what do you find out from taking something away? Well, now students graduate from high school, go to college, and they only know how to make popcorn and macaroni and cheese because they didn't learn how to cook. Or they get a tear in their shirt and they throw the shirt away, which adds to a global sustainability problem. Why do they do that? Because they don't know how to sew. So what happens in the absence? And they don't know how to do a car loan. So I cannot wait to hear about your project and looking forward to helping you move it forward.
Thank you.
Nariman would like to introduce herself.
Hello.
Thank you. I am a faculty at Illinois State University. I'm in the School of Information Technology. And I work on health informatics as a computer scientist. So, and I've worked with collaborators from the University of Tennessee Health Science Center and in Memphis, and I'm currently also working with Ochsner Health in Louisiana. Some of the projects I work on are using artificial intelligence to make predictions of certain health outcomes, or one project that we're currently also implementing at Ochsner is predicting an emergency department crowding score based on certain parameters within the ED. And also pregnancy data, predicting things like pregnancy-associated hypertensive disorders in pregnant women. I also, I wanted to talk right after Dr. Webster was talking about her project, and when you mentioned health education and promotion, we do have a project called Personal Health Libraries, where we, it's like a platform for providing recommendations for different, we applied it to different application domains within healthcare, but it's really meant for that purpose, health education promotion. So pushing recommendations to your app. Also a chatbot for adverse childhood experiences. It's like an automated intelligent question answering system. Yeah, so a lot of ideas, so mainly digital health platforms and using AI for analysis. I think one thing I also participated in is building knowledge infrastructures within the NSF Open Knowledge Network prototype, or the Convergence Accelerator, I think, program. That's what it was called. So that's one of the grants that I really wanted to apply to. They have like different themes of case studies or knowledge infrastructures or education, but the deadline is coming soon, and I'm not sure if I want to apply for that one, but at least give it a try. But yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. One thing that you can start thinking about doing, you threw a lot of ideas out, which is fantastic. I love your creative energy. But when you develop a concept, you want to focus on one project at a time, and you can develop one-page concept papers and start a conversation. The one that you feel is the most important to you, most significant at the moment, and most achievable. You can email that to the program officer for this NSF open access grant, or email DARPA or other sponsors, and start having those conversations about, this is the funding, this is the direction I want to pursue for a grant. And if you want to apply for a grant that's due in maybe 3 weeks, oh my goodness, it's due in 3 weeks and I've just started, then remember that these grants come around year after year, and that the federal calendar for NSF, for example, ends September 30th. So if you develop a concept paper as part of this program and submit it to the program officer, then what you can do is invite a conversation and learn how that program, that RFP, might be changing starting October 1st. What are the changes on the horizon, and write for next year's grant. Now, sometimes we're writing for something that has a greater sense of urgency. We need to do this element, and we need to do it right away, because this is impacting rising rates of suicide, or the learning deficits for people that have had COVID, right? And we want to create this technology intervention and start testing it now, right? For example, if you submitted a concept paper to NSF and you had that conversation, you could ask them, well, maybe this is an eager grant or a rapid grant, which is a shorter timeline, 1 year grant, $200,000, but it gives you the funds and the bandwidth to do that proof of concept, to plan, to prepare, and to create that preliminary findings that will map towards a larger proposal that you would submit next year. But these grant types, rapid and eager, they have to be invited. So you have to first start with your program officer, talk to them about, is this really promising? Is this aligning with your priorities? What do you suggest I do next? Do you think that this rises to the eager or rapid? And ask them directly, can we start now or should we wait till next year? And if we start next year, what should we anticipate? And don't narrow your topics, don't narrow yourself to one sponsor. Remember that you want to develop a funding strategy and include an ecosystem of sponsors, public, private, philanthropic, even your internal funding opportunities that will develop that proof of concept or preliminary findings that would lead to publications, which then give you credibility when you do apply for a larger program. Does that help?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Who's next?
Hello, Sandy. And
hello.
Can I be next?
Yes, you may.
You go.
Hello.
Please.
Okay.
You have your phone on also?
I think she's been shared room with Donna.
Donna, do you think you can put yours on mute, please?
She muted herself. Can you hear her in the room now?
Thank you.
Adorable. Now we'll hear you.
Wonderful. I don't hear the feedback now. Are you okay?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, hello, Sandy. Okay, sorry for this. I'm Ken. My name is Ken Cui. I'm from University of South Florida, Department of Civil Engineering and Environment. And my research field is transportation. Recently, I'm focused on the shared micromobility, like the e-bike, scooter, moped scooter. And my preliminary research project is about the safety related on the field of the shared micromobility. How does the users using the shared micromobility, loss of the safety concern, and maybe even crash accident happen during the riding, how to mitigate or how to predict this issue, as well as help the users find a good parking spot to benefit the vendors to manage the vehicle fleets. And my question is, I did the literature review and lots of the theoretical level research, like the modeling from the machine learning ways to build model to resolve some like the parking problem. And my question is, need I to have a clear understanding from the reality level before I apply the grant?
That is a great question. And one of the things that the peer reviewers, one of the reasons why we write with our peer reviewers in mind is because the questions that they will have in their mind are, is this achievable? Is this significant? Why is this important? And having that, those questions in mind will help you determine, are you ready to apply for this grant? What do you need to do in advance? Say, for example, you wanted to create a solution and you're doing a project at USF because we're cool, and you develop a place for them to go, for these scooters and things to go. And they're all electronic and they plug in or they lock or they're safe. Are they user friendly? Are they usable? And are they safe? You know, if you put them there, then what do they do? What do those pedestrians do next? can they from that space have to cross a busy highway to get to their classes? So thinking through the logistics and the operational aspects and why it's important, right? So there's increased prevalence of these on campus. We have a very pedestrian campus, like a lot of universities do. And you see bike lanes and that it changes the culture and the process of getting from one place to another. But also, I don't know about other universities, but one of the biggest problems at a large R1 university is often parking. So where do I park? So why do we have all of these other forms of transportation? Because no one can find a place to park, so they don't want to have cars on campus. Or why would they want to have this area for scooters and things? Could be because they don't want their $400 hoverboard stolen, right? Is it safe? And they want to make sure that it's charged. Maybe this is a place where you plug it in so that when you get out of your 3-hour class, you have a fully charged board to take you back to your dorm. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yes, but not only in the university area, maybe in the city area.
So tourism as well. And we
Yeah,
see a lot of
tourism,
these,
yeah, citizen, yeah, community users, yes.
which is cool because then you can think about it from two different perspectives and from two different sponsor opportunities. You know, how does this impact tourism and access to shops and creating these opportunities for cities?
Yes.
And also in an academic or university area, how can we test some of these projects and see if it works here, then it may work at Disney World or Anna Maria Island.
Yeah. Donna, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Donna, I'm in, or not Donna, sorry, Can. The area is really cool. I'm actually at USF as well, and I'm in tourism and things of that nature. And one of the things that's interesting about your area that I have not seen done yet, because there are so many different companies that are doing this, even in a given city like Sarasota, Tampa, St. Pete. What ends up happening is you have different data that you can get from them. And one of them that I think would make for a fascinating series of articles and a grant to really look into some potential solutions would be the geo-tracking of accidents and damage where they are vis-a-vis where they've been left and seeing if there's some correlation there. There's just a lot of really cool kind of studies that can be done there, and I have not seen those in the literature anywhere. But as these proliferate, not just throughout the EU, but throughout the United States, I think that this is a global issue as well that you could really shed some light on and maybe get some collaborators from some other, well, here or other institutions.
Well, let's think about some kind of sponsors. Who would sponsor something like that? Well, the National Institute of Health wants us to be more pedestrian. Doesn't this help address obesity? Absolutely. And who sells these things? I bet you they'd love to shed some light on why they're important and how to do it.
And the state's going to look at the Department of Transportation, may be very interested in these, and they don't have the bandwidth to be able to get at this themselves and would really lean on us to do the work.
Absolutely. And hotels. I mean, Marriott Foundation, for example.
Yeah.
Was that helpful?
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate.
Welcome. Who's next?
Isaac actually has a follow-up question. He's wondering, could you share more regarding proof of concept and how it could assist the grant application?
Absolutely. So let's say, for example, that I believed if I created this widget that a little piece of plastic that went around my neck, held onto the VR, so that when I put the VR down, I didn't have to put it on a table. I could just put it down like you would with glasses. You put your glasses down, you pick them up, you're not going to lose your glasses. What if I did that for VR and I used a type of easily 3D printed plastic. So it is something that I can send the code with a a QR code when you send someone a headset. A QR code, you download it, you send it through your printer, it prints this easily adapted piece of plastic, which will what? Help you to not move your neck so that when you are wearing your VR, don't worry, you're not hurting your brain or your skull. If I developed one, that would be a proof of concept. What I would want to do is disclose. Where do you disclose? Most universities have a disclosure office through a tech transfer office, but if not, then you would go through the US Patent Trade Office to disclose your idea. And developing one and showing that you have a patent for it will then be a proof of concept that you would then publish. And through publishing raises the credibility of your capability to do one project, and then using it as an intervention in a larger project of how does this help? Does that help? Does that answer your question? I made all that up, by the way.
Well,
How was that, Isaac?
yeah, I never thought about that. But my question is, if we already have a prototype, for example, the virtual environment, and we already done some preliminary test, and does that, so when you apply for grant, would the reviewer looking for publish articles relate to our preliminary data before they can even consider giving like award a grant?
Well, this is where we navigate R&R, required, recommended, right? Is it required to have published data before you apply for a grant? No. Is it recommended? Yes. Why is that? It gives you credibility and it protects your intellectual property. And if you have not published, but you do have a credible proof of concept, please, please, please disclose to your tech transfer office so that if it does lead to intellectual property, you have protected it because you own it.
I see.
Does that help?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Never consider that, but we talked to our IP office, and they said it's a copyright. Because software cannot be patented. So does that change anything?
It does. It makes it even more important that if you can publish it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Scholarship is so incredibly important when you're applying for grants because it shows what you can do, that you can do it where you are, and it gives you the opportunity to speak to why it's important and why you did it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sometimes a publication is a 5 or 6 or 8 page journal article in your top tier journal, but it doesn't always have to be. Sometimes a publication can be something that you write for the conversation. Writing for the conversation is a great idea because it gets your ideas out there. And when the conversation picks up a piece, those articles are often reprinted in the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, and even internationally at London and all over the world. So it's a really wonderful way to hold on to your ideas and to share them at the same time. And they only publish research. It doesn't cost anything to publish in the conversation. Do we have anyone else who's willing to go next? Or anyone in the room?
I can. I'm a
Wonderful, yeah.
librarian. Thank you for doing these workshops. We appreciate it. Our I'm a librarian. Our grants sometimes look a little different, I think, and our university archivist, April Anderson Zord, and I are looking at probably a National Endowment for the Arts grants to digitize the Jean Scharfenberg papers. She was a theater professor here at ISU from the mid 60s to early 90s, taught some fairly famous actors, Jane Lynch, John Malkovich, Laurie Metcalf, and had a lot of interesting theater pedagogy ideas. So that is our project.
That's a great project. And I'm glad that you're going after NEH. You should also, well, you probably already know this, but in case you don't, IMLS grants are really wonderful to get too. Are you familiar with IMLS?
Yes, yeah, not a lot of, there don't seem to be a lot of funding opportunities for libraries, and that's definitely one of the big ones that we see a lot of. So yeah, but thank you.
You're very welcome. I have found that IMLS is also very open to receiving that concept paper and really having those conversations about grants that they don't have a grant call for. So I'm glad that you're going for NEH. It's a great place to start, but always build a broad portfolio. And it's an exciting project. I can't wait to read more about it with your abstract. Next. How much time do we have?
8 minutes.
8 minutes. So I think we can do 3 or 4 more if we can.
That's good because Patricia's dying to speak, but she's just not quick enough. Go ahead, Becky.
Okay. Do we want to do Becky and then Patricia?
Hi, I'm a proposal development officer at the University of Georgia and the director of our office proposal development for proposal enhancement is asking me and a colleague to take this course. So we're both enrolled and we want to write a granted grant. So we're thinking the director's idea was see if we can strengthen ties with the 8 HBCUs that we have in Georgia. And we've worked with them on some projects so far. And so that was one topic. We're wondering, can we write a grant collaboratively, my colleague and I, or do we each have to write a separate one in this course?
You can write a grant collaboratively, or you could write them individually. Okay. I want to remind you that all ideas are welcome, and we want you to come up with all the ideas that you can to advance research administration, research development, sponsor research, clinical research, and improve the democratizing of ideas, which is an underlying priority for granted. Okay. And make sure that even though you're thinking about how you can partner with HBCUs within your state, that is not a requirement. What is a requirement is to ensure that you have national transformation and that you have a way to evaluate and assess the project that you're proposing. So happy that you're doing that. I welcome your ideas, want to see it fleshed out a little bit in your Mad Libs. And if you and your colleague both have ideas, don't be discouraged to both of you put in a proposal. You don't have to, and you can put in 2 proposals that both of you co-write. But okay. Granted is looking for all of our ideas. So don't limit yourself. Big sky.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yay, Patricia. Go.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sandy, and everyone for doing this. I'm really excited to participate. I'm also from ISU, and I'm in the nursing department. And I've been having some discussion with our assistant dean for student services about how to improve retention and success in our nursing program for our BSN students. I've done some previous research on nursing student retention and strategies to increase retention and success in my classes, but this is a more broader project where we're going to use some established retention tools and look at other college data to see what other resources we can provide for our students to help them be successful, such as maybe stipends for childcare, travel, things like that, that you normally don't think that may be barriers for some of our students. So I have looked at the Illinois Board of Higher Education as an education grant, but I'm interested in other grants that I'm not really familiar with some of the larger federal grants.
Well, I'm going to assume that you're aware of the nursing foundations that and professional organizations within nursing that fund that training. And I suspect that you may have already done the literature review or a needs study or a survey to find out why are you exiting the program and what could have been done to retain you, right? Is that true?
No, I haven't done that.
Well,
That's
those might be first steps, which is great. Creating an exit interview that looks at the barriers is really important, as is having those surveys, maybe even a survey that's delivered to all through a nursing professional organization. What are the barriers to retention? But you'll also want to think about, well, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? And how would you do it? Right. So if one of those aspects of, I want to improve retention, so I want to look at purpose. Do they feel a sense of purpose in becoming a nurse? Why do they enter the field? Why do they want this degree? And then start there and then start looking at those barriers and look broadly at those funding opportunities, because there is, of course, a national shortage of nurses. And by creating these, this improved understanding of the barriers, it will also open the gateway to collaborating with other nursing programs to address barriers in programs. And you may want to think about programs within your state, maybe partnering with a community college, create a pathway from a 2-year RN to a 4-year RN, looking at hospitals, what the needs are, and also thinking about how you might identify those philanthropic sponsors for elements of the proposal, elements of the program funding. So you might have one sponsor that funds a training program, another sponsor that does an outreach program. And so you may create this broad umbrella of, this is what we want to do so that we can get to the end. What is the end? We want to provide more trained nurses for more hospitals, right? And it might surprise you that maybe one of the barriers is we don't have enough hospitals to do the internship programs in, or having that preliminary needs study or survey or exit interviews might help give you some information that broadens or deepens the study itself.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I can't wait to read your Mad Libs. It's going to be fun.
Yusra, you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for this wonderful course. I'm learning a lot. Many of my questions were actually answered already, but I'll first introduce myself. I'm Yusra, also from Illinois State University, School of IT, same as Dr. Amar. My research is focused on cybersecurity and privacy. I was wondering what funding venues are more suitable if my department does not have a PhD program. I remember applying for one NSF grant a while back, but one of the reviews that I got was that my institution might not have the funding, the capacity to actually conduct that research, because there might not be PhD students with me to, work on that problem. So are there any medium-sized or small grants maybe I can apply for before going for, larger NSF grants?
Well, yes, but you could do that. You could, say, oh, well, go do a smaller grant, and might even be able to get funding through Illinois State to do a promising preliminary or planning project. However, you might also think about, well, if I partnered with another institution close to us that had a PhD program in this area, perhaps we could together be a competitive proposal for NSF.
Yeah, I do have some smaller grants through the university. I'm working on external grants at the moment. And I was also wondering, for somebody who does not have a lot of collaborators from Arvin schools, how to, approach the grant writing process. Yeah.
That's why we're here, right?
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to learning.
So I encourage you to begin with the Mad Libs activity and think through what you want to do and the objectives. And as you think about the project that you have submitted to the National Science Foundation and the peer review feedback, think about, well, have I talked to that program officer? If, what suggestions might they have to move your project from unfunded to funded? What could you do? And partnerships is often one of their solutions. And it's not always another institution, but would the learning outcomes, would the knowledge be advanced if you partnered with maybe industry or other stakeholders for your project?
All right, thank you.
And I'm happy to help. Anybody who hasn't had an opportunity to ask questions or share their research area, please know that I'm here for you. And our team wants to help you move your proposals from good to great. If you have peer review findings, if you have a project that you're working on and you would like to move it from good to great as a part of this program, please feel free to share it with us. Everything shared is completely confidential. We'll protect your intellectual property and give you the feedback that you need. So, are there any questions before we close this session?
We have two quick ones, I think, in the chat. So Narman says she's junior faculty, but she's more than 5 years past her PhD due to some postdoctoral fellowship work. Is she still eligible for an early career grant?
Yes, so long as you have not received NSF funding.
There you go, Narman. And also Swastika said, I would like to explore NIH funding opportunities for PUI/MSI universities.
Primarily undergraduate institutions or minority serving institutions. And there are many, including the NSF area grant and the R15, which are, I'm sorry, is that the R15, which is specific for the smaller institutions. And when you go to grants.gov, you can select, I want to look for funding opportunities for this particular type of institution, and it will narrow the findings to that type of eligibility. Okay, well, great. If you have any questions that I did not answer, please reach out to research@sar.usf.edu, and I'll see you Friday.